I don't like the boomers. That's a pretty negative statement. I'm a boomer, but there's so much about my generation I don't like. And again, that's pretty negative, but I'm going to try to do a kind of a positive turn on this. I mean, we've always, and I'll talk about this more in the podcast. We were always the me generation, put me first. We messed up a lot of things. My generation did. We messed up churches in many ways because we insisted that you give us church our way instead of us making the type of sacrifices that God would call us to do through a local church. There's so much about my generation that I lament, but out of all of it, 76 million live births, out of all of it, there's not all negative. So I'm going to talk about why there has never been a better time to reach the boomers. And I will say this. Out of the boomer generation came a lot of entrepreneurship, a lot of creativity. And when I think about that, one of the first things that comes to mind is our sponsor, Cheney Associates. Steve Cheney he's a CPA, but he is nothing like your stereotypical CPA. He is entrepreneurial. He is a great business person. And what he's done is just unfathomable to me. He has created Cheney and Associates, been around for a long time, over 1,100 churches that they serve, as an accounting firm to serve the church, as someone that can take the place of your bookkeeping, your finances, and all of that. And someone sometimes will say, "Well, how much does that cost?" Well, I'll tell you this: every church that's ever used him have said, "I wish I'd never asked the question about price because it is modest compared to the benefit that I get." They also have a brand new is probably an overstatement. They have a relatively new podcast called the Church Advisory Podcast. And so here's what I recommend you do. Set up an appointment. Talk to our friends at Cheney and Associates. Go to CheneyAssociates.com/church answers. That's CheneyAssociates.com/church answers. Set up a free appointment with them. I got to tell you, folks, our churches are making too many financial mistakes and they're losing too much money. And they're asking questions like, should I pay for my accounting services? Yes, you should. It's one of those things that you don't want to leave in the hands of someone who does not fully understand what they're doing. Okay, so make that appointment, CheneyAssociates.com. Okay, I have in this podcast and the subsequent podcasts 2 approaches that I'm taking. I am looking at the boomer generation, my generation, the baby boomers, and I'm talking about the possibility of reaching them. And then I'm going to talk about Gen Z. Obviously, I'm skipping over a lot of generations. There's a method to my madness. Maybe I'll talk about it. Maybe I won't. But I do want to talk about these 2 generations. I want to talk about the boomer generation, and I want to talk about Gen Z. So why has there never been a better time to reach the boomers? Let me just give you a little bit of background. This generation was born between 1946 and 1964. They still are the largest generation in history in terms of live births. Obviously, immigration will change that, net immigration. And then, of course, the number will go down as we get older. The numbers are already going down. But between 1946 and 1964, there was this massive boom in our population curve. And that's why we call them the baby boomers. A great number of babies were born. Why was that? Well, Johnny came marching home again in World War II, and Johnny and Miss Johnny got married. And one thing they wanted to do was settle down, build a nice home in a neighborhood. But suburban neighborhoods weren't even known until the boomers came along for the most part. Have kids, be happy, have a lot of kids. And this kind of almost euphoric type of attitude that came back from winning World War II transferred into large families, because that's kind of the reality is that when parents are optimistic about where they live and the times of their nation and the times of the world, they're more likely to have kids or bring kids into the world. And that was the attitude. These baby boomers were booming. And so the parents of the baby boomers had lots of kids, and that big curve, which just looks like a mountain when you see it on the graph, began in 1946, and by 1964, the last of the baby boomers were born. I was right in the middle at 1955, which indicates my elderly status, but still there's some boomers that are older than I am. So why is this such a good time to reach the boomers? I'm glad I asked because I'm going to answer the question. It's not rhetorical. It is a question I want to answer. First of all, there are 60 million living boomers in the United States. Hear that again. 60 million. Yeah, there were 76 million of us, and obviously some of us are dead. I'm not one of them. I shouldn't say some of us. Some of them are dead. I'll join them soon. But there's 60 million living baby boomers. It is a humongous, is that a good word or is that just a boomer word? It's an incredibly large field to reach people for Christ. What did Jesus say in Matthew 9? He said, these fields are ready to be harvested. There's so many people here. We don't need to pray for opportunities to reach people. What do we need to pray for? We need to pray to the Lord of the harvest to send workers into the field. And this field is emblematic within the baby boomer generation. 60 million of them living today still in the United States. Here's another thing. By all of our measures, probably one of the most accurate of these measures would be church attendance. But by all of our measures, they're more receptive to the gospel in the church probably than any time in their lives. And that doesn't usually take place. Usually with age comes declining receptivity to the gospel or to going to church. But we're beginning to see an uptick where we elderly people, are really willing to hear the gospel and to not only go to church, but to serve at church, something that baby boomers did not do a whole lot of, serve. In fact, for many of the baby boomers was serve me, help me, do for me first. And so you got 60 million that are now receptive to the gospel and to church. It is a great opportunity to reach people with the gospel of Christ. And so I just say that right away, with 60 million being more receptive, why don't we want to reach this generation? Now, this may be a little bit self-serving for church leaders, but it's a reality. Baby boomers are under 18% of the total population of the United States. They're under 8% of the total population of the United 18%. They're under 18% of the total population of the United States. I think it's exactly 17.9, but who's quibbling? But listen to this. Though they're fewer than 18% of the population, they account for 53% of the nation's wealth. And there's a great transfer of wealth that is going on right now. And one of the reasons that we should be listening to people like Cheney and Associates is because this wealth is going to be transferred somewhere. And it might be to the next generation, the children and grandchildren. Of course, that'll be some of them. It might be to other institutions like schools and hospitals, but churches need to get in there as well and begin to talk about, okay, think about leaving a legacy to your church. You can still leave some to the kids. You can still leave some to some other charitable organization. Churches don't ask. That's just another subject. But they're 53, well, it's actually not. They count for 53% of the nation's wealth. What a great mission-minded fuel that could be if we could more and more tap into that wealth and use it for the sake of the gospel. They're there. They're the boomers. And guess what? Hospitals are knocking on their door, hospital foundations. Schools are knocking on their door. Other charitable organizations are, and knocking on the door. I'm using that metaphorically. But why aren't churches specifically talking and getting serious with their church members about leaving a portion of their legacy to the church? Again, that's not happening in many churches. And one of the reasons it's not happening is because in many churches, we're not asking, would you be willing to leave part of your legacy to our church? That's just as simple as that. Most church members have not even thought about that. So there's another reason why there's never been a better time to reach the boomers. There's never been a better time to have a ministry called Upward. Upward is an incredible ministry. And when I first started partnering with Upward, I just began to, one of the reasons I wanted to was because I would ask churches, how are you reaching your community? Oh, through sports. Well, what kind of sports are you doing? And of course, there was the usual basketball, volleyball, cheerleading, all those that you think are usual, but now they're beginning to add more that are just some of the hot sports, if you will, right now. And one of those hot sports is running. And call Upward up and just say, hey, I want to do a 5K. I want to sponsor it for my community. It is so easy. All you need is a willing person in your church. You don't need to have any other tools, and you can get a running ministry going called Upward Running. So tailored training plans, access to a new run club app, simple to start, one passionate leader, helps to promote healthy habits, but even more than that, it gets you in the community. Incredible success. This is one of their many sports, and it's running. Get more information about this. Go to upward.org/runcoach/. Once more, upward.org/runcoach/. So, love Upward, love Cheney. Let's get back to the baby boomers for just a moment. I just mentioned that they account for 53% of the nation's wealth. And that is an opportunity for our churches that is unprecedented. Here's something else that I'm liking. Did you hear me whine about baby boomers at the beginning of this? How that there are 76 million of them that were born between 1946 and 1964. And they didn't make the kind of difference I would hope that my generation would make. You say, well, tell me more about that, Thom. Why was that going on? Well, the baby boomers, are the me first generation. We were the ones, and here's why it happened. 76 million live births from 1946 to 1964. What does that mean? The marketers are coming to us, the baby boomers. Why? Because there's this humongous, I said that word again, there's this large field of people that they want to sell to. And so the baby boomers became the most marketed generation in history, still are to this very point. But what did that do to the baby boomers? The baby boomers were getting hit by, hey, we want you to buy this. We want you to do this. We want to take care of you. In other words, all these marketers were saying, we are going to provide for you, baby boomers. And eventually that was one of the major reasons. Also, I think it was related to parenting during that time. That's another story. But what happened is the boomers developed this me first attitude. Now, think about it for just a moment. I don't know if you like fast foods. I know people like health foods more than fast foods, but just think about advertisements. Some of you will actually recognize these jingles. I'm not going to sing them. I'm just going to quote them. Some of you will have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm still going to do them anyway. So there was this company called McDonald's. Of course, you know that company, McDonald's. And when McDonald's was growing at its incredible pace, they were insistent on assembly line burgers. You say, well, isn't that the way it is now? No, it's not the way it is now. Assembly line burgers simply meant not only would the burgers be an assembly line, but the ingredients you put on the burger would be in an assembly line. And so I don't recall what it was. I think it was maybe ketchup, mustard, and pickle and onion, if I recall correctly. That was standard. What happened if you did not want ketchup, mustard, pickle, and onion? They put you in another line. And they said, special order. And they'd even mark it on the bag, kind of like the mark of the beast. And they'd say, special order. And you'd be put in this other line, and you would wait for years to get your burger. Well, there's another burger company that saw what was going on and saw how frustrated the boomers were at all this, and they were trying to meet the needs of the boomers. And this company was called Burger King. And look this up on YouTube sometime, this particular jingle. But they came along and said, hold the pickles, hold the lettuce. Special orders don't upset us. All we ask is that you let us have it your way. Have it your way at Burger King. Wow. Burger King started eroding into McDonald's market share. So much McDonald's actually had to change. And they didn't start imprisoning people who requested a special order. I like my cheeseburgers with just ketchup. And when somebody tells me, special order, wait for 17 years and we'll deliver it to you, I don't like it. Well, here's the whole thing. Here's my point. Boomers were getting it their way. Hold the pickles, hold the lettuce. Special orders don't upset us. All we ask is that you let us have it your way. But that transferred into so many areas of life, including the church. So if boomers decided to go to church back when they were younger, they wanted to have it their way. And so the seeker targeted movement, somewhat seeker friendly. I think seeker friendly is actually really legit in some ways. We could get into that, but it became a consumer driven church market. And the whole idea was get comfortable. We don't expect anything of you. We don't ask anything of you. That's a hyperbolic statement. I realize that. But at the same time, that was the attitude of reaching the boomers. And so what happened? Many boomers came into our churches asking this question: what have you done for me lately? Hey, are you giving me my worship style? Hey, are you giving me my type of build? Are you making it my temperature? Or do you have my programs and ministries? I want it my way. And what happened is churches began to capitulate to the unreasonable demands of the boomer generation. And in that capitulation, expectations went down. And you know what happens when expectations go down in a church? Attendance goes down. People don't want to be a part of something that doesn't make a difference. And so over time, this consumer-driven movement began to make the churches decline, not have as much in terms of financial commitment, not have the servant-type commitment that they needed. It was terrible when the me-first attitude hit the churches. But here's the good news. The me-first attitude is changing. And it's, in some ways, depending upon which surveys you look, rather dramatic. This particular survey these particular surveys are telling us that the boomers are coming and they're realizing, hey, you get to be our age. We don't have much time left to make a difference. And we're ready to do something and make a difference. Our church is going to be there to meet them at this point of desire and readiness to make a difference. It's a great opportunity. The me first attitude is changing, and this is an opportunity for churches. So why has there never been a better time to reach the boomers? They're going to be around for a while. Yeah, I know that we've lost 16 million of our 76 million boomers. So, some of that has been people who've moved out of the United States, but most of that has just been death. And so that's just what's happening right now. I mean, the oldest boomer in 2016, 1946 to 2016, is what, 80. And so life expectancy is a reality. And so life expectancy, though, with boomers is changing. And it's changing almost dramatically. The life expectancy of a boomer alive today is 85 years old. Whichever birthplace they are, 1946 all the way to 1964, their life expectancy is 85 years old. 10 years from now, 5 years from now, it'll be closer to 90. And so even though we're old, we're not going away quickly. And many of the boomers are going to have good health and the ability to do things that elderly people did not in the past. In other words, they can serve in your church. They can make a difference in your church. They can really be incredible disciple makers in your church. I'm saying this, and I don't recall if I've ever said this. There has never been a better time to reach the boomers. 60 million living today, more receptive to the gospel. They account for 53% of the nation's wealth, even though they're only 17.9% of the total population. The me first attitude, which haunted America and particularly the churches, is changing to how can I make a difference? And life expectancy is going up. So many of us will still be around for a long time. I encourage you to look at your demographics and see how many boomers you have within your drive time. Get a Know Your Community report. Very affordable. It gives you all kinds of details about your community. Look at those boomers who were born between 1946 and 1964 in your community and begin to think, how can we serve and reach them more? There's never been a better time. There's never been a better opportunity. Well, as always, we are so thankful for our sponsors. We've mentioned Cheney & Associates. We've mentioned Upward. I just want to just say one thing about Cheney & Associates again. This entire presentation about the changing dynamics and demographics of the boomers coming into our church is illustrative of how important it is for us now to have strong financial systems in our church. And look, the accounting firm for church in America is Cheney and Associates. And I cannot think of another organization that can meet those kind of needs from an accounting financial point of view. They have a cool podcast called the Church Advisory Podcast. I'd encourage you to go to that and begin to listen. You're going to learn a lot. We appreciate so much Cheney and Associates. And this particular podcast, all about the boomers, we're going to switch gears when we start moving to another generation. And we're going to talk about a much younger generation, the generation in many ways that represents some of my grandkids, and that is Gen Z. So stay tuned. If you have the opportunity, go on over to that podcast. It's already there and waiting for you, since we record 2 at a time, and that'll be waiting when you are ready to listen or watch it. Thanks as always to our YouTube viewers. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you can. To those of you who are listening on your favorite podcasting app, give us a rating, review. Let us know. Get the word out, because we love serving the church, and this is one of the ways we do it. Thank you as always for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. Hope to see, hear, and talk to many of you, from my point of view anyway, when we get to our next podcast on Gen Z. I'll see you then.